Hi everyone. Are you feeling well after this lunch? Okay. Ready to work? Okay. Because Natalie and I are extremely proud to be... Siesta? No. Don't speak about siesta. Yes, we can hear you. Okay. So we are extremely proud and honored to be with you in Krakow today to support the REMA's efforts, because it has to be efforts, sorry guys, to achieve meaningful change in the field of early music. So we enter this REMA stage. It's impressive, you know. Natalie and I, as a duet, because this is music, it has to be musical. And this duet has its own meaning, because can you imagine that we have met during, this is not very original, during the pandemic and the lockdown. And well, this ended in writing a full book together without having met in real life for just one time. And well, this is what we call a white paper, but it's a full book, which title is, in French, Le spectacle et le vivant. Cécile is commissioned to translate it because it's a kind of play on word, but I think if someone has finds the right title for it in English, we'll be deeply thankful. So,
vivant in French is performing arts. So there's a play on words because vivant is also living. So it's hard to translate because it would translate literally as performance and living, but
show and vivid.
So
show and vivid?
my mission
Why not?
is
Why
to
not?
find something catchy in English, but it will probably not be literal. So watch this space.
So, but this is not what you're going to work on this afternoon. So, fortunately, don't worry. So, before we started this white paper investigation, Natalie and I had several intuitions, and one of them was that our minds, bodies, and souls should be involved in the transition processes towards a fair and sustainable world, so that all our joint efforts, to make structural change happen might have a chance to be successful. Pressure? No? It's okay. So maybe it's polite to introduce ourselves first, and then we will see what mind, body, and soul means by exploring where do we stand, speaking of transition, then looking for viable transition paths, and then this big affair of acting with greater coherence and effectiveness before seeing how we can support the REMA's members in this transition path. So, sorry, Natalie, I start with my career, my activities. I'm a cultural entrepreneur, consultant and author, and at the very beginning of my career I have worked alongside French Baroque ensembles that you may know, like Les Folies Françaises or Le Concert d'Astrée, and was part of the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées as well, when Handel was the star of the programming of Dominique Meyer. And in 2008 I have founded Galatea, which is an agency, but was devoted to artist management, concerts and event productions, and consulting. And for 4 years, we have focused our activities on consulting. And we try to offer expertise in strategy, management, and transformation to public and private actors, which some of them are orchestras, cultural and creative industries cluster, cities. We are working together for the Opéra de Montpellier. Transition, green transition is a crucial topic in our missions. This is your turn.
Hi, I'm Nathalie Moine. I have been working in the book industry before I joined the opera, in Opéra de Lyon and then in the Opéra Comique. And every time I was asking about relationships between inhabitants and opera. So that is really principal research. And in that dimension, I'm a strategist consultant, and I work for a cultural organization who wonder how to build new relationships with, in French we say territoire. we use it so many often. I don't know how to say it precisely in English, but with the place, with the spirit of the places. I will say territories. I know it's not the good word. Maybe
Work for community.
Work
I
for
think,
community.
Or local, at a local scale. This is Cécile, who told me this a while ago.
So Sophie told you about our book and our research. The question we wanted to ask is that performing arts at the time of Anthropocene is exploring uncharted territories, but I think this one is okay. The question we wanted to ask is, what is the role of performing arts in the transition process? What is transition? It's a process of transformation during which a system moves from one dynamic balance regime to another one. And we don't know which one. It's something we have to build. So the question we asked was, how do the performing arts professionals take this question into account? And today we are going to see together, especially, how could early music professionals tackle the issue at stake? A few words about our approach. When we met with Sophie, we shared the idea that as performing art professionals, how can we contribute to building a fair and sustainable future? For us, it was the big question we tried to ask. And to answer that question, we lead some interviews, 60 interviews, with performing arts, culture, human sciences, and social ecological transition experts. Our goal was to outline the practices and issues raised in the course of the COVID pandemic and to consider ways and means of strengthening the essential role of live performance, to put it on the core of the question. The book is a bit long, so we will just tell a few words today. Of course, we can speak.
It's almost impossible to give a very representative idea of it in just 15 minutes, so sorry in advance.
The first thing which is important for us to say that on the transitional road to a sustainable world, where do we stand today? Because for us, transition is about perceiving differently. So where do we stand? We share the constant of a sense of urgency and the desire to take part. First of all, the question of transition is today a widely shared concern in the whole society. Just a few examples. In 2021, torrential rains fell on Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Eastern France. An IPCC report, do you see?
You know what IPCC is? It's an International Panel for Climate Change, what we call GIEC in France. This is I don't know how many, there are not dozens, thousands of scientists working on climate change. So there is a report that was just published a few days ago.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So this IPCC report,
who was published in August 2021, shows that the greenhouse effect is more and more stronger due to human activity. A Eurobarometer survey of July reveals that the main concern of citizens is still climate change before the pandemic crisis and the economic crisis, leading the concern for 18% of Europeans. But next come poverty, hunger, and lack of access to water, followed by the spread of the COVID-19 virus. So where do we stand? Once we say that, we cannot consider that cultural actors are not taking the issue, are not doing anything. There are common visions and different solutions. we can really observe a professionalization of key players, especially for social issues, but different methodological approaches regarding environmental protection, green transition. And for us, that represents a risk of partitioning, because silo thinking without the organization or gap between cultural places and the city represent a risk of making the idea more efficient. Because we are really convinced that the subjects are linked. Climatic issues must be coordinated with social ones. Thinking ecology is thinking a state of equilibrium, a global one. So our proposition is to demonstrate the same involvement in creating work of art as in addressing it to audience. An example could be the Mont Theatre in Brussels, who is trying to work on a green opera. And in that reflection, they are considering settings, but also production and public relationships. When we ask about, when we are questioning the idea of transition, we have to consider the resources of performing arts. What are they today? First of all, of course, the artists, which are the depositories of an invaluable raw material. And their conviction are at the core of the subject. Just an example, David Martin, who decided not to take the plane anymore, or who used existent costumes for his opera. But around the artists, there are also men and women who make live performance happen. And they represent a resource that has to be handled with utmost care. Teams in the organization and inhabitants as components of the territory too. So they have to be handled with utmost care too. And of course, nature's treasures, considering nature as a continuum and no longer as sceneries or set. Environmental vulnerability is, of course, concerning every one of us. So after we saw where do we stand, we try to project and look for viable transition paths towards sustainability, considering that transition is about projecting into the future despite uncertainty. With all the interviews we made, we saw that the question of words is really, really important to change our perception. Actually, how to deal with the values of excellence and accessibility. Should we talk about audiences, inhabitants, or people? In France, we are more and more thinking about cultural rights, which is an idea linked with capabilities approach. The capabilities are defined by an American philosopher, which is, her name is Martha Nussbaum, who considers that rights are something, but if people are not able to activate the rights, then it's totally useless. So the right of everyone to take part in cultural life has to be activated. And taking into account the citizens' concerns is a necessity to nurture and develop a real cultural democracy. So when we ask those kind of questions, we have to face some dualisms. And we are really convinced that we have to clear up apparent contradictions between cultural rights and excellence, responsibility and freedom, local and global scales. So the idea is to compose with all those dimensions to create his own perspective. For us, all those questions are at the center of one very, very question. This is how. How to create a resonance between people concerned and programming is the very principle of creation and live performance. And we really think that more than a constraint, it can be a source of inspiration and a new space for creation.
Thank you. Well, the last part of our study was for this coherent and effective actions, which might be our most important concern, because transition is also about interacting with networks, as you do, and territories, or at a local scale. Thank you, Professor. In accordance with a systemic approach, systemic, holistic, whatever you want. But transition could not be the addition of all our efforts in this perspective. It has to be systemic. And acting with greater coherence and effectiveness, well, it might be a joy. Why not? So it's about enjoying the benefits of cooperation. And maybe our first mission is to foster new dynamics within each organization. And it proceeds from, first of all, the teams. And very often it is the teams that are committing to this transition processes by getting to better know each other, sharing views, diagnosis, and concrete actions. But the boards, of course, are also involved. They have to manage change and move forward all together. And this together thing is much more important than doing this transition quickly. Because quickly leads to badly. It's my opinion, but teams and boards are important, but also public actors. I say this because I'm French. This is we will be able to debate this later, but public actors are important, and external stakeholders, meaning suppliers, providers, audience, inhabitants, because they have an important role to play in cultural policymaking for the first ones, and as stakeholders for the second ones. But making cooperation happen within the music ecosystem, it's not that simple. I don't know what it is about for early music. It's not that simple, and it results mostly from mutual understanding and commitments, and we have observed this with charters. Is this the right term, Professor? This is, well, this is accurate. I said Mr. Professor, you know, after this morning panel session, I said Mr. Shame on me. So is it charter? Is it the right term? Set of rules, you know, that French baroque ensemble like Correspondance invented to, and as well, music declares emergency. I mean, the people coming from the UK might know this. So they have written down charters to behave and act coherently. It needs cooperation. It also requires a greater open-mindedness and transversality, which are tangible with solution-oriented initiatives like Margot Lallier, raise your hand, Arviva, non-profit organization, which is a French one, but whose English colleagues are the Julie's Bicycles one. Cooperation needs also cross-sectoral alliances in favor of the common good on a long time scale. And this is, for example, what the Shift project, Carbon Transition Think Tank in France does, but also Shift from the European Union. Shift meaning Shared Initiative for Training. And there is an extremely interesting report that we will share with you afterwards. I've just spoke about common good, and well, performing arts are part of the commons. This is a deep conviction we have, you know, as forest does, as water does, and maybe finding our ways to a world worth living. A solution might be to experience it through everyday life, because any cultural space ought to be considered as a place for living, and performing arts professionals are in a position to achieve a quality of presence. On a local scale, we are not concert hall venues are not the place of exception. You know, it's daily life, and it's not bad to say it. Professionals should also pay careful attention to the living of these territories, and well, maybe we could let ourselves be transformed by territories before aiming to transform them. So whether they are real or fictional or political or symbolic, these territories we contribute to build. We contribute to build them as performing arts professionals, to make them habitable worlds for the living, and rather to aspire to a so-called proximity. Maybe we should look for renewed and balanced neighborhood relations. That should be moved on the front of the agenda, I think, as transition is. So maybe, Adele, could you tell us how does all this occur in the specific field of early music? You have already tackled issues like mobility, fair employment.
Exactly, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Just really briefly to talk a bit about REMA, about the network itself. When we decided that we wanted to tackle this question and this of transition, we actually made, while talking with you and while observing the network itself, that these main questions are really, let's say, the specificities of the early music sectors. Of course, this is not a final list, and now that we are opening the network and that we have, well, all the different branches that are composing it, we really want to start this conversation with you. And as you have also the complete knowledge and history of early music, of its specificities and what there is to defend.
So I don't know if... Yes, we are to be supportive. So it's a point, but it's much more interesting to ask you the following question. But maybe this is time to have a full circles organization in the room, or no, it's okay. That's okay. So imagine a world where early music is one of the most inspiring actors in sustainability and social responsibility. What would this world look like? So you have 55 minutes to decide. And the organization is that you are 5 to 6 people in a circle. And of course, you won't be alone. We are going to talk with you. But the thing is, you should have this reflection. So that makes a quintet or a sextet. That's okay. And together we form a whole orchestra, but or chorus. But this is not important. We would like to give you 20 minutes. 20 minutes to think of this question together, and then each group will have an ambassador or a guest or speaker that will be able to report to the whole group what your reflection is about this first question.
Success for a musician or ensemble or for a festival is as a musician is, well, you travel around the world and you play lots of concerts all over the continents. How many hundreds of concerts? Then you are a successful musician. And we can go on. All of us in the environment have a definition of success, which is working against the environment. So in order to do that, we need to redefine what is success. How you're a successful musician, or in a successful ensemble, or a festival. That's not an easy job. We have no idea how to start doing that. But of course, we all have to start thinking about that. What makes us a successful ensemble? Is it how many concerts we play in 5 continents? Or is it something else? And of course, those who give us money also have to agree on our redefining of the word success. So that's actually all we came up with. But I actually think there was quite some.
Does someone want to question this vision, or does everyone agree with this, or everyone? Everyone does agree with this? Okay.
What's the question?
Do you think? No, I was just giving a chance to someone who would like to debate this redefining success issue, to speak out.
I can also, for my own personal, when I thought about this discussion this morning about female thing, we can also start redefining quality. That's also another thing we could start.
But has it to be the key indicator if we want to speak with a managerial
no,
vocabulary?
That's why we have to redefine it, because we are defining what's impact and success and how many and how much, and maybe we should change that.
Okay.
I mean, we started to say this. Well, back in Teleman's time, he made a whole lifetime in one city, in Hamburg. He stayed in one city, or Bach. He spent 30 years in one city. He didn't travel. He did fine.
Except to go visit Buxtehude.
Yeah, by foot.
By foot. By foot.
Define doing fine.
Sorry?
Define doing fine.
Well, he could. We can all agree that he did. He was successful, and people liked what he. And he was. Well, what to use the word? He was sustainable career in one city. We also have, of course, other artists who travel around Europe. We can always find examples of other ones, but
it's interesting. Immediately, when you changed from success to impact, you immediately went for a measurable target, counting the number of seats. But perhaps it's about the immeasurable, the intangible. What makes that?
So maybe we shouldn't redefine it, but we should expand it of what we mean with success or impact.
For me, impact, if we go to the Prado Museum and we see Meninas, Velázquez Meninas, the impact of the painting is that millions of people come to see it. But is it a good impact? And Las Meninas, the impact is the painting itself. So that's the richness, not the tourism who come to see it. So what is the real impact? The painting itself, or the millions of people who come to see it? If I think it's the painting itself. So it goes to in music it would be the B minor mass, the intangibile.
Because also, although millions of people have seen it, you can't measure how many of those people have been affected by it and in what way.
And there's also the beauty, the impact of the beauty and what is beauty. But I mean that the impact is something that sometimes it can be very good, but what is the right impact? That many people come to your concert or the B minor mass itself. Yeah. And for me, that's another really important subject to talk about.
I think it's a very interesting discussion, but success is very related to a personal feeling. And so it's never possible to measure. Also impact, it's the same. It's very personal. If I can perform 40 concerts. It's very good. But we had 60. And a young ensemble who has 15 in the first season is very successful. So who will say it?
It also depends on the way you look at the music or the intention that the music is written for or made with. So there are, in not only in my opinion, but the thing that we did in a project with the European Music Council, 3 ways for looking at music. You can look at music from an economical point of view, and then music is a product. And then success can be measured to the sales of tickets or the sales of CDs or whatever. But if you talk about music as an art form, you need completely different criteria to measure the success. And the third angle you can look at music is music as a tool for social change or social coherence or whatever. And then it's also about impact. But then success, once again, is very different. So, and it is important in every discussion to keep these 3 sets, these 3 angles discussion on music, because if you mix them up, you will always end in a blurred story and never come to any conclusion. So it's very important if we talk about this early music and what we want to discuss also on the level of sustainability, what is the way, is it on economical sustainability or is it on a social sustainability, or are we talking about art? It's a completely different angle, but it will help to come to a result.
Do you know this thing? Sorry to interrupt. If some of you are familiar with corporate social responsibility, you have, the social pillar, the economic and environmental pillar, and I'm not very good at. Okay. And this is where the system is viable. And life is possible. Next.
Move to. So, well, we are group 2, and we struggled a lot with not with the challenge, but with finding an easy answer. And as you all know, there is no easy answer. So we just came to address the dilemma. And that's maybe our real answer. This is the first step before we even approach an answer. We should address the dilemma in which we are as organizations or as artists in this field where we have local groundings and questions. We were mainly focusing on the question of cultural exchange as our mission, and the evil which is connected with this, which is travel. And travel causes, we are burning fuel, like we came here all with planes, or some came with trains, but we were discussing a lot the dilemma in which we are since, we discussed this now since 2 years and maybe even longer. And the easy answers 2 years ago was, even in REMA, then we do residencies. No? So, and I always said, ask any musician, would they like to be 1 week in Madrid and have a residency, or just 1 day and next day fly over to, Stockholm or so, which is also very nice. But we all, every time the musicians would say, we'd like to spend a week in Madrid and a week in Stockholm and have residencies, but the consequence is that other groups, especially young groups, will not have that chance. So it's a really not solvable dilemma. And this dilemma is going against our cultural mission as exchange. And you all remember that after, we were not there, but after the Second World War, there was this initiative to bring young people together in the whole of Europe. And I have been also as a boy in France, in camps where young people meet. So our music is in a similar, has a similar mission to bring people together. And if we don't do this for a long time, nationalism will rise again. So it's not a solution that I'm sorry to disagree. Telemann's work was spread internationally, so it's on other ways that the international territory was approached. So we have to make a very intelligent analysis of what this dilemma means in our local situation. And for example, we had a very mixed group where film business and ensemble management and festival management and me as a practical musician, where we came from our various backgrounds and shared, well, our skepticism, but also our willingness to take the challenge. And so the challenge is, well, without my glasses, I cannot even read my... The challenge is first to, yeah, well, of course, to analyze, for example, something like the energy audit of a certain activity like an opera or a film production. That's an important step. If you make a festival, you have to first to analyze what do we spend as energy and where can we really do something which is not just greenwashing. I wanted to show you a part of green. We came to this little block. In the middle, you have the green, the blank paper, which is not ecologic, and well, if it's maybe it's, we just took it as an example. We have the recycled paper, and we have the blank paper, and so we thought it's maybe a philosophical task for us that we think about. Of course, we could use all our prospects or flyers in an environmental responsible way, which, by the way, in Samos we try to do that already, but also with the philosophy and also the question, is this already greenwashing? You know the term greenwashing, if you do something just to raise your image that you're doing something good, and then you can say, okay, we do all these travel things like we did before, because we already do so much to save the environment, and so the analysis has to be intelligent and the talk has to be tough, and it's not so simple to say just don't travel, because then also success is not possible for young emerging artists, for example. They really need to go from A to B, from one city to the other, from rural areas to big cities and vice versa, because that's a high value in our time, and it's impossible to find a solution if we don't make consultations of the most intensive, on the most intensive level, and not just finding cheap answers. That's more or less what we all agreed on. I hope I didn't... yeah, and there are some, of course, practical things. They might be tiny. For example, travel in... You gave one example. There's sometimes a plane which is cheaper than a train, and a train, for example, from Brussels to Lyon, that's still something which is manageable in most cases. It's a little bit more expensive. So the ensemble, your ensemble, Vox Luminis, agreed that they would try to do it. So whenever it's possible to do something reasonably good as a decision to take a train, then they do it, even if the plane might be cheaper. The same is for us. To fly to Berlin from Cologne is most of the times much cheaper, or to fly to Dresden. But it's a question. One could take the train in most of the cases from Cologne, even one had maybe 2 hours more. That's a sacrifice we should all be willing to give, and also to put it on the list. Yeah, but is it enough or not? I cannot give you the answer now. It should go in all these work groups. Yeah. So.
The problem is that the plan is going
Yeah, but on the long run, we have a. That's we said. Well, the question was, what is if we would be inspiring actors? So it also means that we have a lighthouse effect. So even if the plane doesn't go now, the Lufthansa has their flights booked already, and even if it's half empty. But maybe on the long run, if there's a change in behavior, of course, also for the rock festivals who have much, much more people going, and maybe we are not the most important traveling thing, but traveling group. Sorry for my English, but it's. But I think the lighthouse effect for the future is also not to be underestimated, because this is now a big theme. Also, another aspect in Germany, for example, we have now 2 green ministers and they brought, well, apart from actual politics, there is some very interesting connection between sustainability and social responsibility. This is something, oh, sorry, I have too many things in my hand, that if climate change leads to catastrophes in our countries, it's not such a big problem. It is a big problem like last year, but in any other more problematic areas, this would really cause poverty and long-lasting poverty over generations. And so it's also a...
It's going to cause death.
Yeah, death, yeah.
By me?
Death, yes. And so this is also a political question, and so green activity is also political responsibilities, which we can do also with the maybe lighthouse effect for even they react maybe only in 5 years that the results can be seen, but I think the time is now. So that was more, I hope I spoke for the group and didn't improvise too much, which is, by the way, the thing I like to do most, but so... thank you very much. But maybe there's some comments directly from us.
Well, we would like to do next.
Yes?
Okay. We're not doing any discussion.
No, because we try to have 5 minutes per group, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. It's really interesting. Who is the next one?
So I think we start to see that all contributions will have some links into each other at some point. So we thought we better hop in the branch quickly so that we are not in the position where we just repeat what others already said. So for us, it was a fun thing to realize that actually we're in quite a good position as early music sector. That was something that Peter brought up. We are not in itself, in the concert itself, we are not a very energy consuming art form. So we don't need amplification, we don't need any elaborated projections that consume a lot of energy. We don't even actually need much light. We can perform candlelight concerts in itself. So what we do on stage is not the problem. That was already a relief. We're not a rock festival where that would be an entirely different situation. So where is we do have kind of a good starting point, so to say. The problem is more in the setup, and there we also in our group we had an ensemble, 2 festivals, and a hybrid form of the 2. The problem for us seemed to, we started to question the setup in which our in which we all act, which is a travel-intense setup, which is a setup in which we need to look at all the surrounding elements that are not the concert itself, if we actually want to develop an impact. And of course, that is travel. Of course, we came quickly to a point where we were discussing at how do we need to, or how can we optimize the setup? How can we optimize the environment in which we work so that sustainability becomes equal both in economical and in environmental? We didn't touch that much at social in our discussion, I'm afraid, but where we have this shared middle zone of economical and environmental sustainability. And for us, the keyword seemed to be collaboration. I was very much argumenting from the side of the ensembles, of course, because we all know that if an orchestra, if an ensemble goes on tour and needs to follow the logic of festival timelines, needs to follow the logic of presenting structures that have their Sunday series where you can only do this kind of music while another presenter who happens to be just 350 kilometers away really would have to have this program on a Thursday, and there's no change possible to that no matter what. These are actually aspects of success, so to say, to link into the first one. It's a successful, like an image that a presenter has of how do I successfully structure my season that has these elements that have to remain untouched. But if we don't touch at those, then we will never come to a more geological form of touring that would enable ensembles to get to a point where they can go on tour, bring whatever a presenter might be interested in a manner that it becomes economically and environmentally more sustainable. So this setup question, how do we actually structure what we do so that it can become more efficient and thus more sustainable? That was what we were looking at together. What did I... But yeah, I also would need my glasses, I realize now. And we did very much agree on the fact that the mission of cultural exchange, this is something that we don't want to touch at. So it's something that we need to optimize if we don't want to have to touch at that. So this was pretty much. Did I forget much?
Well, just one hint, that's more an idealistic point of view, not a political point of view. As we are in the early music sector and we are going to rediscover early music, this is at itself a kind of sustainability.
It's upcycling, musical upcycling.
Yeah, it's musical recycling instead of wasting music. Just to keep in mind, it's of course not a political.
Yeah, and actually Raquel also had the point that the very regional thinking, the kilometer zero, how they call that in Spain, policy of shopping, how you have local shopping, that this is just something that we need to remind ourselves over and over again as well, that local programming, that support of local artists is a starting point that has a high impact, thus success.
It's a question but for Cluminus is based in Wallonia, the southern part of Belgium. We are forced to have a certain amount of concerts in the region and a certain amount of musicians who live in Brussels or in Wallonia. Do we all accept? We have to accept, otherwise we don't have subsidies. But do we all accept as organizer or as a group that the state obliges us in a certain way? It's just a question.
Does it make sense if I actually start speaking for my group then? Yeah, okay. Because this leads into one of our points. It is actually, it's also an answer. It's maybe this question of globalization versus localization. And in an ideal world, shouldn't we get inspiration from both? Whether the state finances or private sector or private sponsors, we can get it from anywhere. And so my message would be to value your local ecosystem and your local artists, not only those who are traveling to your cities, but everywhere has something to offer. And what it offers isn't just great music where you are, but the possibility for a personal connection, this feeling of looking at people on stage and saying, I know them, and making an intimate personal connection beyond the music, beyond the cultural experience, but this level, I think, is actually really invaluable, and it's something that stays with you and doesn't leave after the concert goes away. I think there's space for both, obviously, but that intimate experience, I think, is really important. And it then combines both the ecological and the social responsibility, less travel, social contact, connection, but also it allows for the community there to offer economic support to its own people and integrate them into the society. It's not just the people who are working in the shops and who are running the businesses, but the musicians and the artists are part of their own culture. So I think it would be great to move forward with a bit of this sense of a real connection. And I'm going to pass the microphone on to somebody else in my group, because we had a couple of points. Thank you. Was it you? Or it's one of you.
One of the answers to the ideal world, should I go?
It looks weird.
Oh. Sorry. In answering this question to the ideal world that we could imagine, that is where early music is most inspiring and in sustainability and social responsibility, we think that this ideal world looks like Krakow, where the government is spending 5% of the budget to culture. No, seriously, we think you need a lot of money to come to this ideal world. It's where we saw this triangle. It's a very small part, and that's maybe sustainable, but you cannot let alone all the other big parts. So the problem is out there, and how do we going to solve this? We don't have any idea, but we think you need a lot of money.
Yeah, just you talking maybe about the other points.
Can I just pick up on one thing about needing a lot of money? In the UK, there's a thing called transition towns, talking about transition. And in transition town Totnes, they had their own currency, which is based on the acorn. And people transact based on acorns. It's a local society. It's entirely enclosed, and you can spend this currency on cultural things, on things in shops. So when you say you need a lot of money, I'm being a bit facetious, but there are other ways to think about value and trading.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yes, but for instance, if you ask an ensemble, or if an ensemble wants to travel by train and it takes like 8 hours instead of a 3-hour flight and so on, then as a promoter you have to offer like at least 2 nights to stay. So you need extra money, or you have less concerts, or if you want to have this residency we talked about, then you have to invest extra money. But I understand you. It's a question of what is priority. And
Localization, because there all of the values contained within one society. So the money doesn't leave that society; it just gets recycled because they don't need slotties.
All right. Little group 6, I'm sorry, I'm blocking some. I'm in the wrong place. I should be here, shouldn't I? We thought about a few things what the world would look like when all this comes to pass. So one thing, in completely random order, is a place where inclusive language is more common, because inclusive language is a sign of the arts being accessible to all, which is a second point where you don't have to be from a certain part of society in order to have a career as an artist, nor to attend culture. So inclusive language and accessibility for all, I think, can go together. That thing was already yes. One that was a little bit of a left fieldish thing. Early music being so research-based, encountering a thing, looking at it from different ways, trying to find out more about it, we could expand that principle to society in general. I'm not quite sure how, but it leads to a more perceptive society because that's what we do. So it's a very utopian thing, but it's I quite liked it. On a very concrete level, we normalize train travel. Of course, if some of us need to take flights because a concert is in Trondheim or in Oslo or in Finland, others of us will need to not take flights maybe, or figure something out there. And the last thing was already basically said, that actually early music might be on the lower end of the carbon emission table, but that shouldn't prevent us from getting to the bottom, shall we say.
Thank you. Isaïe. So just a few concepts to maybe add some new ideas, because a lot of things have already been said. We started the discussion saying that culture is not an exception. So all the artists and the cultural fields should be involved in, of course, this question of sustainability. But we have to be part of the society. So culture cannot be considered differently, but we have to take our part, and we need to be a leader even if we are part of the global issues. So artists have an obligation and they have to send a message. So we thought that we could play a role of ambassador and use all our actions to address social issues. So all the cultural actors could be a lever to try to develop new concepts, new ideas. So this question of addressing social issues was something we discussed. One thing we mentioned is we don't have time. We have to be quick all in this reflection. In France, they said, and you reminded us, we have a few years to solve the main problems. So we need to be quick. And the paradox we have to solve is politics is short term. And in the meantime, we need time to develop all this new system of travel or installment of a new way of thinking our activities. So it's a paradox we all have to solve, how to be quick with short-term things and the politics and all the grant system and the public funding, which is sometimes very problematic according to sustainability. I think you said in UK there is this question that sustainability is one of the criteria of getting the funds. So if you can't prove that you don't travel by train, you can maybe lose your money. I think it's quite interesting because all the countries haven't developed this question. So a very concrete idea could be this one, even if we all raised the problem of international touring. So that's the paradox. We also have to see how to develop local community, residents and responsibility in the territories and solve international touring. We already developed that with the previous questions. The problem of exclusivity, so that's more concrete idea, to ban exclusivity, especially in big cities. Artists can have problems to develop a residency in a big city like Paris or London or Madrid, because if they appear one time in a season, sometimes they can't make a second concert. So it's something maybe we should raise all together and maybe develop more cooperation and more coordination between cultural actors. So probably exclusivity is one of the questions. We said that culture should improve people's lives. How to measure the value of our actions? So that's a question of impact that we started with the first group. It's very important to measure that value, and the immaterial value is, of course, one of the main questions. And how to link transition with education. So we mentioned that idea that education was one of the starting point of explaining how to find the ways of doing a more ecological transition. So how to link education more concretely. What were the other, maybe you can add some other points in the group. So we don't have time, and culture is not the exception was the first link of the discussions we had. More or less, it was the main points. Did I forget something? Thank you.
Did every group present his idea? It's okay? Are there some questions or remarks?
What's the right?
Oh.
Could I just offer a reflection on success and impact, and also refer back to a bit of REMA history, which is not that long ago, I think 4 years ago, when some of us were in Vantaa in Finland, and we had a workshop which bore some similarities with this. Essentially, we had a speaker who was expert in the music festivals business and gave a presentation in which he said music festivals generally had an appalling negative impact on the environment. And there were all sorts of things that we could do to address that. And I don't think anybody in the room at that meeting 4 years ago disagreed with a single proposition. We all, of course, those of us involved in early music festivals, hope to get as many tickets as Glastonbury sells, 100,000. And as the point has already been made, our impact is less. However, here's the first thing. That was 4 years ago. Now, if you look at the negative impact of music festivals, it is hugely reduced already, because people, leading organizers in that sector, have said, we must reduce our impact. We must have less diesel generators. We must produce less waste. And not only have they had a dream of doing that, or have they imagined how to achieve something which is worth achieving, they've done something much more banal. They've developed strategies and they've developed metrics. And my first point is, and this is why I asked the question about, what is A and what is B, we are already making big progress in the music festivals business as a whole in reducing our impact. But the point that really I think hits me most strongly is that for these not to be abstract questions, again, this is why I posed the issue, for me it's a question of what I can do or what my business can do. What do I have agency over? What can I draw up a business plan for and make sure that I implement that plan? What can I control? And that is, I think, a genuinely difficult question for a lot of people in the early music business. And the example was very fairly given. Vox will encounter this challenge. All organizations in our sector, to a degree, will encounter this challenge. Some journeying is cheap and some journeying is expensive. And the question of sustainability must not just be addressed at the level of environmental sustainability. There is the financial sustainability of our enterprises. And sometimes these two definitions of sustainability can be in conflict. Sorry, that's a rather long response to some of the discussion.
It's a perfect transition to the second question, but first I give the...
Je suis désolée, je vais la faire en français et je crois que Cécile va pouvoir aider, mais je ne maîtrise pas du tout assez l'anglais par rapport à ce que je veux dire et c'est important. La question de la réduction de l'impact ne peut pas se mesurer seulement à la question des déchets ou de l'empreinte carbone, mais aussi de tout ce qui a trait à la biodiversité. Et donc à l'impact notamment des festivals sur les écosystèmes dans lesquels ils évoluent. Est-ce que certains, tout le monde, non, tout le monde comprend pas le français. Si, ça va, à peu près.
Just briefly, so in French, because I really want to make a point, reducing impact is not only about less waste or reduced carbon footprint. We have to think of biodiversity and of the impact of festivals on the ecosystems that surround them.
Par exemple, dans très peu de temps, on ne pourra plus faire des festivals en plein air dans le sud de l'Europe à cause des canicules. Donc aujourd'hui, les solutions qui sont pensées, c'est de la climatisation, ce qui ne peut pas fonctionner. On n'est pas le Qatar, ça ne va pas marcher longtemps. Et pourtant, on le fait. Je veux dire, dans certains secteurs, ils le font, on est d'accord, mais ça ne va pas pouvoir fonctionner du tout. Alors qu'il existe aujourd'hui dans la science des possibilités de rafraîchir par les sols. Et il y a beaucoup de choses à faire, mais la hausse des températures, c'est un exemple qui va nous rattraper dans bien moins que 10 ans, par exemple.
Because in the very short term, actually, we won't be able to organize open-air festivals anymore in the south of Europe because of heat waves. So are we going to decide on using air conditioning as Qatar does? Some sectors already do it, but I don't think it can work. There are some scientific advances with cooling and ground pumps and the like, but we're talking about less than 10 years from now.
Et la dernière chose sur la question des petits gestes, c'est que si tout le monde, et là on sort complètement du secteur de la musique ou de la musique ancienne, si tout le monde fait ces petits gestes de déchets, etc., ça nous fera réduire de 15% les impacts. Or, les derniers rapports disent que si on ne va pas à moins 50 ou 60% de réduction, les limites planétaires ayant déjà été atteintes, tout ça n'aura servi à rien. Donc en fait, ce sont des changements systémiques majeurs qu'il faut opérer. Et c'est en ce sens que notre groupe réfléchissait sur la question de l'exception culturelle, qui n'a absolument pas sa place dans un sujet où je ne sais plus qui disait tout à l'heure, disons-le, à la fin c'est la mort, quoi. Voilà.
It's a bit dark, she says. We have to talk about all those small daily actions because if everybody doesn't do their bit, it's not going to be enough. So this is not about early music. If we do all these little things day in, day out, it can reduce by 15% our carbon footprint, but 15% is not nearly enough. We've read in the reports that it will take 50% or 60% reduction because we've already reached the limits. So it will take more than these small actions. It will take major systemic changes. And in our group, we discussed about the fact that culture or the art sector shouldn't be exempted from leading by example.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are.
Just a last little aspect which I wanted to add to the travel question is that we should not forget that in the audience, normally much more people are sitting than on stage. And so all our considerations about traveling should, especially if we're talking about festivals, that which is also attached to the question of tourism, that we should not find answers for questions which were never asked. Because if a festival wants, like Utrecht or Boston or Stockholm, wants that people come to the festival and also see it as a value and a mission of cultural exchange, then I think the question of reducing the musicians, who are the least problematic aspects in the whole game, is silly. It's absurd. And so partly, I think, some tendencies here also in discussions also last time in the Zoom REMA conference to say, okay, we do this residencies and that's the answer. And that's why I really, it nearly hurts me, because I see if we reduce this exchange, it will lead to more nationalistic things, and I already see it in Europe, in some countries. It's still very harmless, and nearly in every country. Here, in Germany, in Belgium, so everywhere, this is still okay, but it will not be okay in 10 years. So we also have to take this in consideration. I think it's not the right way to look at it. The richness of a good assortment of young and middle-aged and old artists from everywhere, it's a value, and also United States. It's so I have been really attacked in discussions when I wanted to say we should not forget the North Americans, because they have such an interesting scene in early music. And then, I don't know, that's impossible because of all these planes. And so I think it's the least problematic aspect of the whole game. So that's just, I wanted to say that very clear. Against nationalism.
Thank you very much. Thank you for abording the question of systemic issues. So that's what our second question is about, precisely. How can the REMA achieve the goals? How can the REMA address the question you just put on light on the first question? What kind of rules could the members play together? How could it be a resource to work all together about these matters? This is the second question.
So the first thing we said was simply what we're doing now, sharing best practice and also worst practice. So seeing what people do and what they should do. Lobbying, obviously lobbying for support at continental level, but also with the regional committees, which we're looking at trying to establish more strongly, lobbying for support at regional level, but using the example of the supranational organisation that we are to strengthen that argument at regional level. Encouraging joint touring and collaboration. We've got a UK regional group which has been going for about a year, and next year we do have our first joint UK tour. We're offering 7 dates across the UK to a Spanish group who are coming over. Delma's been leading on that. Tools for ensembles, looking at where we can provide sort of sample emails so that you can make demands upon promoters. You can write to the promoter and say, we want only vegetarian food, or we want no plastic in the venue, or something similar to that. Looking at tools where we can measure the impact of what we're doing, maybe looking at joint reporting on statistics and things, and trying to put that across the board. This is quite an interesting one, looking at whether we can get a group deal for measuring our carbon footprint. But what I said we'd want to do is be very careful about that, because we're all very different, with different sizes, different scales. So what we'd want to do is probably keep that information, dare I say it, secret for a period of time, 2 or 3 years, and then measure it per head, and try and really interpret what that data means. And over that period of 3 years, show how we have reduced it from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, and give concrete examples of what we've done, and then share that information more widely. But don't shout from the rooftops in year 1. But then communicate this. Make sure that we do shout from the rooftops when we have achieved something, and that people, audiences, politicians, colleagues know what we've done. And finally, a simple toolkit with 10 easy wins, 10 quick wins, but make sure there's no compromise with those. So, for instance, banning meat for your venues, including REMA conferences, banning meat at REMA conferences. There we are. That was us. Thank you.
Can I take your post-it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Who wants to be the next?
So, in our group we are only 3, so it was very simple. So we already agreed that we are not, REMA and early music, a big player. So we are just some cricket players on a, let's say, rugby playground. What we can do, it's spreading the word and circulate among members examples of good practices. This is our common opinion, and something which is mine, we didn't discuss. We can ban meat if somebody wants, but please, I cannot imagine early music without coffee. So don't bring coffee. No, not without coffee. It's not possible.
You know what? Coffee has a carbon footprint, which is quite important.
Really?
So drink water. Okay? No, it was for joking. So next group is, I don't know. Who will? Okay. I'm sorry, it's the catastrophe on the faces because I've just had the copy. So I'm so sorry.
No, most of it that we discussed was actually already said by Richard. You were quite thorough with yours, I have to say. So we also discussed that REMA as a platform is the perfect institution to provide, to circulate and provide tools that actually then all members can implement on their own. Peter said that it might be an interesting approach to actually also mirror back the feedback then from the ensembles to REMA, what was possible to implement, what was not possible, where we struggled, what was something where we reached a goal in order then to be able to optimize the tools. We concretely got to some sort of checklist that would provide very pragmatic proposals. There are, as we know, many players in the field already that are quite active in providing these sorts of charters or agendas that one can follow. So if REMA as a platform can circulate these or help circulating these, that would be helpful to all, I think, of us. We did have quite a vivid discussion about the question of do we need program booklets or not, and can we not replace that by direct interaction between the artists and the audiences, or some hybrid forms or some digital forms of these. Raquel was taking a big stand about this, that we can really have another form of connection built with our audiences by addressing them directly, not only saving the paper but also saving the paper. What else did we have? Well, yeah, then there were a couple of elements that might be on that checklist. Most of them have been addressed, like vegetarian food, like a plastic-free environment. So I don't think there's much to add there.
Thank you very much. Someone else?
Don't be shy.
The remarkable groups. Remarkable ideas. Yes, please come.
Not my writing, actually. Thank you. Actually, we had the same ideas than Richard. No, Richard had the same ideas than ours. I saw him steal our ideas because he was we were really thinking about, of course, the first thing would be to exchange good practices, but because when we heard the discussion earlier, we thought many of us can maybe be at a stage much more advanced than the others, and we have to know that, because I have to say that in my structure we are not good students on this specific field, but we are trying to, we are willing to. But if we will be able to share good practices, that would be very nice. Maybe on the new website, there could be like a platform we could use to see what is done and what we could replicate and do. The second thing was about the toolkit. If we want to start somewhere, we need to know where we are. So if the REMA could help us measure where we are actually as a festival, but also as an ensemble, as a CD label. That would be nice that we could have tools. I'm sure there are toolkits provided by Arviva or other ones, but it could be nice that it could circulate among the members. And we had also, yes, you talked about the regional committees. I think it could be something we could use also for this touring thing, not only in a country, maybe it could be a little bit larger than a country, I don't know, but in European spaces that are close one to the other, in order to rationalize these touring things that we could do. So mainly, yes, basically there is a fourth one, but I can't read it. What is it? Oh yeah, of course. But you already said that you stole that from us. Vegetarian meals and everything, all the things we said earlier, plastic and everything. But once again, it could be nice to know what others do, because we do things, but maybe not so much, and we could do other things that you do.
Thank you very much. Someone else?
Thank you. Actually, almost everything was already said about these things, but we just wanted to underline one thing about trying to encourage the organizers and the venues to not to compete so much as to collaborate together. I mean, more cooperation instead of competition, because the more cooperation we have, the smaller impact, but the better impact into environment we can have. Finally, we can accept that all of festivals, organizers, venues have the same artists in one big group of artists of the world. So there is nothing very unique. So finally, we can accept that we can share our programs and somehow try to cooperate with this and to set these little local tours better to downsize the problems we usually bring to our environment. So it was only one thing. And second, what I can just share with you as one thing we can just do now. From the former conference I attended to IAMA in Zurich, for each participant, they asked how they traveled there and what is the distance, and they calculated the emission. And in the very end of the conference, they calculated how many trees should be planted to compensate this. And there was a little crowdfunding throughout the members to plant these trees. So very small thing, but it's always something.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry.
This is no sustainable
Of course,
solution.
planting a tree is leaving the footprint, I suppose. Yeah, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
But this is quite new, because I've attended IAMA conference several times, and
Yeah,
we didn't even calculate this.
Yeah, it was first time this year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Some students who were trying to do some startup about environment sustainability, and in Tonhalle, and they were asked to do it. So you can do it online.
This is part of the lighthouse thing you mentioned earlier. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who wants to be the next?
Hi. So we focused on three main things, I guess. The first has to do with sort of optimizing travel, because of course traveling by plane leaves a big carbon footprint. So we thought about maybe trying to find a way for REMA to create more coordination between programmers to minimize, or to sort of minimize the amount of travel involved. Like, I mean, we kind of discussed this in the separate panel as well, whereby like if you travel a long distance to a concert, maybe you should do some other concerts locally as well, so that you have more impact to sort of offset the fact that you travel the long distance. And that also includes like trying to create some sort of best practices, like avoiding exclusivity contracts, because of course, if there are exclusivity contracts, then you wouldn't be able to do this sort of thing. The second thing, we talked about being like, as a keyboard player, often you have to bring your harpsichord or your fortepiano to a concert. And sometimes, if it's a really far away concert, they often don't have an instrument, so they ask you if you can bring it. But maybe it would be useful, actually, to have some sort of database or source so that people could see, for example, which other instruments were available in the area, and then perhaps you could source it locally, and that would, of course, reduce the impact of transporting over long distance. And this could also even be like from other professionals, or maybe even amateurs who have a good instrument, or builders in the area. So just having REMA facilitate more coordination could help this. And lastly, we talked about somehow trying to promote more local activities. So of course, like, people are traveling around to different places to do concerts, but actually maybe it would be good to encourage people to produce more projects in their local community. And of course, I mean, it's difficult when you need specialists from other places, for example, but maybe allowing people to grow their own community through their own activities could be an objective, like an incentive could be provided for this. I don't know, maybe grants or something. So yeah, those are the three main things that we spoke about. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we mostly talked about the sort of local aspect and how oftentimes, especially in cities, we think there's often sometimes some missed opportunities, especially with groups that are a little bit marginalized and don't normally get to experience classical or early music. And oftentimes we've seen that in programs that are sort of designed to combat that, it's ship them out from where their local area is and take them to a concert hall. And then that actually often sort of makes the situation worse, because then people think, that's not for me, early music, classical music, not for me. And it also means that we're missing out on performance spaces and audiences. So what we were looking at was potentially going and taking classical music to them and breaking it down and making it less scary by sort of showing them the rehearsal process in their own areas and encouraging them to get involved with things that way. So rather than having it as a finished product, maybe having orchestral rehearsals in a local community space that doesn't have classical music, maybe in tracksuits or something that's not, you know, really formal concert clothes, and then moving with that. And we talked about that a lot. So that was all we really covered, but that was it.
Thank you. I don't think every group exposed the idea. There are one missing. Yes, there are two missing.
No, I wasn't standing up because everything was set on my paper. I have here sharing good practices, was said twice or thrice. The toolkit, sharing information, collaboration between programmers, venues, and so on. So everything was set before. But
it reinforces the interest of the propositions. Everyone has been, yes, everything is okay.
We just would like to thank you because you have respected the rules and the game was well played. So we hope that this first inaugural workshop will be encouraging for all the issues that we have to tackle all together. Yeah.